Alrighty, as a way of a disclaimer, before we get started in the first aid kits, just as a disclaimer, I am not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not in the medical field, and hopefully I'm not going to be a patient, the good Lord willing. But first aid kits, I believe, have been neglected and have a lack of attention beyond the label of first aid kit. The media usually just says you need one, such as in hurricane season, the weatherman says, include a first aid kit in your emergency supplies. But not a lot of people go into detail. Even on the internet, I found a lack of attention to the subtleties of first aid kits. Lawyers, agencies, and kit makers, they also fail to nuance individual needs. And I believe the individual needs are based on space management and time management. Space and time. Space regarding the content, you need the right shape, the right space, the right allocation. You can't have it too heavy, too big. It's got to be manageable. And things can't be cluttered and in the way. And that's where time management comes in. To manage the time, your kit needs to be organized. And we'll go over that when I get to the kit itself. But just to cover a few introductory points, a first aid kit really is a great thing. If you're busy and you can't be there, it's a practical way to care for your loved ones or to show that you care for your loved ones. I mean, even if you can't have, if they're not able to directly manage a first aid kit themselves, then maybe through caregivers or someone in the community who's a leader and in charge or responsible for managing the community in some way. Someone needs to be in charge of a first aid kit. And that brings me to another point, the problem of first aid stations. And, there's a risk anytime there's a sense of a need or a problem, there's a risk of just throwing money at the situation and, go buy a medical kit, go buy, throw money at it and solve the problem. And that's not necessarily the best way to go about it. For one, you need somebody that's a gatekeeper, somebody responsible, like a community leader or a caregiver or somebody, or if your loved one is responsible, somebody who can be in charge of your kit. Otherwise, without a good steward or a gatekeeper, someone who takes ownership of it, everyone in the community, when you see a first aid kit, somebody needs a bandage, they just grab for it, open it. And to some degree, that's the way it should be. It needs to be accessible. But everyone just pillaging and raiding supplies without restocking them can leave you needing something and not having it when you need it. And that's a consideration also. And plus, these aren't cheap. As I've invested quite a bit here, and we'll find out when I get into the actual first aid kit itself, it's not cheap. And so if you go to the trouble to set up a really good first aid kit, you're going to spend some money on it, and you don't want to just slap it up on the wall or just throw it out there in the middle of the room someplace and just let whoever have their way with it, because it's a good idea to have some responsibility. Now, what varies on the kits that you buy in the store, there may be some specialty items. If you go to a sporting goods store, you might find some things that are good for hiking. If you go to a military store, you're going to find things good for the military. If you go to a pharmacy, you might find something that's good for your car. But generally, this one specialty item is not enough to justify the price of the entire kit. And what you really find that varies from kit to kit is the number of Band-Aids and the assorted small bandages in particular. And simply by adjusting the number, by evaluating a first aid kit by the number of items in the kit, is really very shallow and inefficient and it doesn't really get to what you need. And quite frankly, it gives you a sense of choice of one thing over another. It gives consumers a sense of choice, and it's like a fake market. It's a pseudo choice, and it's kind of like exploitation of neuroeconomics, you know. And I don't want to get on my soapbox, but this is something that you find with with utilities. You know, they give you all these different choices of plans and everything, but really, do you really get a choice? You know, healthcare. It's while we're talking about first aid, healthcare. You got all these different plans, but do we really have control over what we're choosing? Do we really know what we're choosing in the fine print? And you know, everything you sign these waivers at the end, you know, on the internet and everything. Do you really know what you're signing? And it's all just you know, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but there's a lot of fake market, pseudo choice, you know, neuroeconomic exploitation that seems to go on, and I think people ought to wake up to that. But I'm not going to get on my soapbox. We're talking about first aid kits, and yeah, and that's pretty much it. And we'll get into a simplified version of my version of a first aid kit. And once again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not in the medical field, and hopefully I'm not going to be a patient in a hospital anytime soon. But and of course, if you really need an in a real emergency, the thing to do is, you know, dial 911, call the professionals. That's the first thing before you even go for a first aid kit. If it's a real emergency, you know, someone should be dialing 911 or calling an ambulance, getting to the hospital, taking care of business. But at the same time, you want to have it's a good idea to be prepared and have things on hand just in case, to deal with contingencies. And again, it's a good way to show that you care for the people around you, our brothers, sisters, you know, fellow citizens, and I think it's just a good way to care for one another, even though a lot of the stuff in the first aid kit we might not ever even use. Hopefully we won't use it. But some of the little stuff, the Band-Aids and stuff, it's good to be, you know, to provide things like that for the people you care about. And for that reason, I think first aid kits are much neglected, and they should be right up there with flowers and chocolates and all the nice things we give to our mothers and fathers on Mother's Day and things like that. There should be a little sentiment behind first aid kits. And now, without further ado, let's get into it.